Hello, hi everyone. A very warm welcome to this event today. Where we're going to talk a bit about how we're seeing a bit of a pricing reset in the industry. So I have the right experts on the event today. But before that, before we get started, um, we'd love for people to share in terms of where they're joining us from. I am joining from London, and surprisingly, the weather is not bad for this time of the year. Usually it's gray, but today it's sunny, so maybe it's a good sign that the discussion is going to be healthy and friendly today. Uh, Quickly introducing myself, Ricky Sundrani, partner with the commercial and solution analytics practice at Everest Group, do all things related to pricing for cloud infra security services. I am joined by very talented colleagues, Rahul and Prashant. Rahul, please introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, Ricky. Hi, Prashant. Hi, everyone joining us today. I'm Rahul Gehani. I'm a partner with Everest Group. I lead the team over here, which advises enterprises on how they can get optimum value from their outsourcing contracts, as well as we also help providers with insights and benchmarks around what are the latest trends when it comes to pricing and solutioning of deals for IT applications, infrastructure, cloud, PPO, all of these areas. Good to be talking to everybody today. I'm joining in from Gurgaon, and the weather over here is once again pretty warm. It was raining pretty heavily a couple of weeks back, but it's back to the warm summer season over there. Prashant?
Thanks, Rahul. Hey, hello everyone. This is Prashant Shukla. Glad to be here, and thank you all for joining this. I'm a vice president with the organization. What I do here is I lead s- something called Markets and Executive Insights, wherein our mandate is to take a step and keep an eye on the overall IT and business process services industry, uh, understand the dynamics which are in the play, understand the forces which are defining the now and the next for the overall services industry. So, kind of a strategic lens, a bit more forward looking in terms of how things have played out and where they are headed for the overall services, right? So today I'm joining from just to keep things even. I'm joining from San Diego. I'm on the west coast of the United States. So the weather they say here is, and I'm kind of traveling, so I'm here for the first time. They say that the weather here is consistent throughout the year. It's quite pleasant. I'm on the side of a beach, but it's early morning. So yeah, so far it has proven to be quite consistent, and it's very pleasant here.
Nice to hear that, Prashant. So thank you so much for joining in. So in terms of uh, what we're going to talk about today, so as I said, I think at the beginning, we're seeing a bit of a pricing shift happening in the industry, for lack of a better word, a bit of a pricing war playing out in some of the recent deals that we've been involved in on a first-hand basis. So today we're going to talk a bit more about that, explore in terms of what does that look like, what's really driving that, because I think there's no two ways about it. AI has a big role to play about, right? Because if you look back, our industry has gone through several evolutions, from labor arbitrage in the early days to industrialized delivery to automation to cloud driven models, right? But each of these was built on something that came before. So refining, optimizing, and gradually evolving service delivery methodologies. But AI is different, right? AI doesn't just improve what is being done, it redefines the very foundation of our industry, right? So if you think about it, work that was traditionally FTE driven can now be performed by AI agents that are faster, cheaper, and in some cases much more accurate as well. The delivery pyramid, which was long dominated by entry level roles, could flatten dramatically, and this will create a surplus of commodity skills and a premium on specialized talent that knows how to train, integrate, and govern AI. And thus the economics of outsourcing will change, right? So pricing models which are typically built on inputs, headcount, or even steady state SLAs will break down, where AI can do that work in seconds with no marginal cost, right? So, and that's why what we are seeing and what we strongly believe in as Everest Group is that AI requires a reinvention rather than an evolution. So providers, we don't think the providers can just add AI as another lever like automation. they need to redesign the way they build, deliver, and price services. So that's a bit about the sort of setting some context in terms of where we are coming from. So talking about and the reason why we thought this topic would be interesting is because over the last 5 to 6 months or so, we've consistently seen that in 70 to 80% of the deals that we were involved in, there was intense pricing war. We've seen deals getting signed at 20th percentile benchmark ranges, in fact even at times even lower than 20th percentile ranges. We've seen providers who were known for premium pricing uncharacteristically dropping prices to get a foothold into the accounts. So we wanted to talk a bit more and explore, is that a consistent trend, and what's really driving it, and then how does that impact the industry? And that's what Prashant will cover. So with that, I want to invite Rahul to the discussion. And Rahul, what do you think are some of the could be some of the primary drivers of this big pricing reset that we are seeing over the last few months?
Yep. So I think there are a lot of factors, which are at play, which is ultimately leading to this kind of a pricing trend, a commercial trend. I think to kind of structure it in a way which is easy to follow, one can broadly look at it from the perspective of what are the factors from the buy side and what are the factors from the supply side. Now, if you kind of focus first on the buy side factors, what we are seeing is it's last 6 months, last 12 months, have actually been marked by a situation where we see a lot of flux, a lot of uncertainty, with regard to macroeconomic factors, um, global trade related factors. Everybody is aware of the tariff wars that are kind of at play. A lot of geopolitical risks escalation, with so many different types of wars, yeah, ultimately either on a large scale or on a limited scale, which have happened, which were simply absent. If you look at it, uh, what was the situation about 3 years back, going all the way till about 10, 15 years back, it was essentially a phase of peace all around, but now that's changed quite a bit with all of this happening. It has led enterprises to actually become very, very cautious about their spend, first of all, and which is in a way belying some of the expectations which we had when we started this year, after a phase in 2023 and 2024 where the industry growth was pretty muted. The expectation was in 2025, we would see a revival of the IT and BPO industry revenues, more demand coming in from the buyers. But these factors that I just talked about, macroeconomic, global trade, geopolitical, all of these have again caused enterprises to remain cautious. We are seeing delayed decision cycles, discretionary spend being put on hold once again. Um, you know, so yeah, that's I'll say one of the major factors on the buy side. On this, another very important factor is that we have started to see, first of all, large deals come back into the picture in the last few months, but they have come back with a distinct flavor of cost containment. So what we are seeing in a lot of cases is clear mandate on the buy side to take out costs, and it's going hand in hand with another trend which we are seeing, which is around consolidation of the portfolio. So a lot of the functions which were earlier outsourced had multiple service providers delivering the services. We have seen a lot of consolidation happening. The simplest form of it is, let's say in IT applications where situations where there are 20 or 30 service providers in the fray, the entire portfolio getting consolidated to two, three, four players, while that's good for the winners, the flip side is that with such an increased volume that ultimately they're getting from a particular client, they're forced to also give pricing concessions. And the consolidation is not just, let's say, at that tower level, like applications. We have seen consolidation happening at a cross-star level. IT applications and IT infrastructure coming in together. And that entire scope getting consolidated and being given to handful of providers. In some cases, it's not just IT applications and infrastructure; it's also BPO getting combined. So all of that's happening. Third thing which I think is very, very important, is there's so much of buzz around AI. There's so much of expectation around AI. So buyers are expecting, like you said, reinvented solutions. They don't want just, let's say, the same old solution with kind of an AI wrapper on top. They really want to see AI playing an important role. And it's not loosey goosey things around, hey, AI will help you achieve these benefits indirectly 3 years from now. They want to see it very, very clearly, directly. They want to see it now. So uh, while other things are obviously important around, let's say, revenue growth, which an enterprise can achieve because of AI, what becomes center, to begin with, is how much of cost savings, can be committed on account of AI. So that's what is kind of happening on the buyer side quite a lot now.
Yeah.
Uh,
Can I can I add this? I
yeah,
think very
yeah,
interesting. I think on you touched on the first point that a lot of large deals are coming back, but with a very strict cost sort of control. I recently as well, we're working on a deal where the client has a clear mandate, very large deal. They have clear mandate that they want to the new deal that they will sign will be at a 30% lower cost than their existing deal, and they want transformation. So, and that's like a how do you do that, right? I mean, it's so difficult for the providers to be able to obviously offer a 30% low cost, but also deliver transformation at that lower cost. So a funny anecdote that I heard some days ago, right? It's almost like, can you do 30% more? It's like buyers asking providers, so can you do 30% more with 20% less with imaginary robots, right? So it is quite hard right now, at least from my vantage point of view. Just one more thing. If you have any questions, please put it in the chat. We'll try and take those during this event, or if not, we'll try and sort of come back to you offline as well. Sorry, Rahul, I interrupted you. Please go ahead.
yeah. No, very valid point and interesting anecdote. That's very much what a lot of service providers are seeing today. There's a lot of expectation because if you look at it, 2024 was a year which was full of pilots, with regard to AI,
Yeah.
which many times did not achieve anything material, So there's that AI fatigue, that a lot of buyers have, and they are really going to providers and saying that, hey, we want to make it more real now, so what can you do about it? Uh, Now, on the provider side, what we are seeing is, keeping in mind that all of these difficult expectations from buyers are there, and the fact that industry is not growing, so providers are kind of really forced to become more flexible from the commercials perspective, as well as, I'll say, the contracting side of the equation. So on the one hand, we are seeing aggressive pricing postures coming up, accompanied by very attractive financial engineering mechanisms, investments being proposed by service providers in order to win a deal, going hand in hand with flexibility around, hey, pricing increase year on year, cola, let's waive it. uh, Termination clauses, which kind of need to be more in favor of the buyer. Yes, let's give the approval for that as well. So we are seeing that flexibility coming in, uh, as well as, the reality also is that in the last 12, 18 months, a lot of providers have actually made significant progress when it comes to how AI can be deployed effectively, in deals. And that leads to significant productivity improvement. The providers have also understood that a lot of that improvement is not something which would fly if it comes in 3 years from now, 4 years from now. So a lot of that is getting front loaded into year one, into year three, into year two or year three as well. So those are some of the underlying factors which are also enabling the buyer, the providers being
Just
able
being
to
able
meet
to.
some of the expectations which buyers have.
Yeah. Very fair, very valid points. And let me on that point, let me bring in Prashant, because Prashant, you track the industry from an overall macro perspective, and you've been doing this for the last decade or so. So from your vantage point, how will this sort of this intense price competition potentially impact margins for service providers in the coming quarters?
Yeah, no, that's a question, Ricky, as we were there recently in our event, Elevate and Engage, right in Dallas. You guys were there. There's a lot of questions, similar questions coming up, and no, absolutely right. I mean, there are a lot of moving parts here, and as Rahul described, the three things which are really playing out in the deals and in the provider dynamics today. Uh, well, so if you think about service providers themselves, right? Right now, there's a limited demand, and so this little money and many people chasing it, right? So we are seeing that to be creating these dynamics. And what we did in a recent analysis, right? We tracked a set of service providers, right? We called it top 10 and bottom 10 service providers. So that's where we found that the one which, yeah, so as you can see in this chart, the ones on the top side, right? So the industry is at the middle, so that's you can take it as an aggregate, which is nearing 0% in terms of growth, right? The top 10 are the ones who are gaining share from the bottom 10, and you see a divergence emerging there. And that is where this is a proof point of vendor consolidation, right? This is a proof point of money shifting hands, people taking share from each other. Now, the interesting part here then becomes how are these top 10 really creating that divergence, right? Is it to do with their portfolios? We did an analysis which did not really yield that. So the portfolios were quite similar. So it was not like, and even then they were doing better than the competitors in terms of growth in their portfolios, right? So then we thought that, okay, then let's double click and look at the margins. Right now, how have the margins trended? And when you look at the margins, they have stayed quite stable over the last 7 to 8 quarters, right, across these set of service providers. Even if you think about the top 10, in fact, they are more stable. The bottom 10 have gone up a little, but it what it essentially says is that at some level, service providers are kind of giving up on margins, right, on their margin expansions, and to win revenue, right, and that's how they are gaining share from the bottom 10. Um, Now, this is one can again argue that the operating margins have been stable over time, but then again, if you look at the comparison between the gross margin and operating margin, now that's where you start seeing things, a little interesting. Now, what has happened? Now, this is just a comparison of the top 10's
Last one.
gross margin and the top 10's operating margin changes last 12 months over the previous 12 months. Right. So on the left hand side is the gross margins. Now, gross margins have gone down, right? And this is where the element of pricing kicks in. So these are the service providers who are getting aggressive, right? Who are absorbing that reset, as you mentioned, who are winning in vendor consolidations, as Rahul mentioned, and they are sacrificing on these gross margins to gain, right, to emerge as top 10. At the same time, now here's the flip side of it. Now, and we would all have heard about almost all of them have had these cost programs at least over the last 12 to 24 months, right? So they have been pulling a lot of levers to maintain their operating margins, right? So that's why for the same set of providers on the right hand side, you'll see that the operating margins have stayed stable, right? They were getting compressed on the gross margin side. And this is interesting because, and I would like to invite Rahul, because Rahul, you look at a lot of these levers, right? But from our vantage point, the way we see the margins going ahead, there's so much you can do with margin management. At some level, you start running out of your levers, and you got to start accepting that there is compression coming in.
Yeah, 100%. I think Prashant, we nobody can win, sort of squeeze the cost way out of, if the top line does not grow, right, like 100%. But interesting point. And Rahul, maybe if you want to throw some light in terms of what are some of these levers that Prashant referred to, that we're seeing providers use to actually help them manage their uh, operating margin better, even though the gross margin has shrunk a bit.
Yeah. So there are quite a few levers which we have seen service providers deploy. So first of all, we have seen a lot of providers curtail non-essential travel expenses. In some providers, there's actually now a blanket ban, on travel for, let's say, the corporate functions. Obviously, sales, delivery, transition teams, they do need to travel for obvious reasons. But as far as corporate functions is concerned, we've seen a little bit of a not a little bit, a fair amount of curtailment happening. And in some cases, it even extends to the pre-sales teams, which providers have. Secondly, a lot of focus on reducing hiring and improving the FT utilization levels. So if I look at it, back 2 years, 3 years back, there was a situation where there was a lot of demand, and attrition was pretty high, and providers had to keep on rehiring, and maintain a bench, to kind of factor for unexpected increase in attrition. Now, all of that has changed. Attrition is now at much more manageable levels. As a result, the bench has kind of the requirement to keep bench high has kind of come down. Across the board, we see very high levels of utilization, to the extent that one would imagine it's kind of maxed out. You cannot go, let's say,
Beyond.
beyond 95%, and and you always need to have at least that basic 5% buffer. And another thing which we have seen happen is, let's say, the reducing utilization of subcontractors, which are generally more expensive as compared to the full-time employees. And again, with the fact that demand is now not surging, so you don't really need to
Yeah,
get subcontractors to fulfill those unexpected requirements. Additionally, things like uh, keeping the pyramids, the staffing pyramids more bottom heavy, and moving work to more offshore locations. So essentially, if you look at it, offshore leverage has increased for most of the service providers, and that goes hand in hand with an additional lever, which we have seen, which is utilizing sometimes, not just tier 2 locations,
yeah,
but tier 3 and tier 4 locations also for delivery. And this is true for delivery from offshore, delivery from onshore, as well as nearshore
sure.
locations. All of that has kind of led to, that chart which Prashant indicated, where margins have kind of held stable. But the question is really, really valid. That
Yeah,
to what extent can you keep on pulling the same levers? Sooner or later, the margin is bound to decline
bound
unless something materially changes.
changes. Yeah. So maybe let's break this up a bit, and let's take this question from Jody Wagner, who's attending this. The question is, are you seeing the same level of posture or aggressive pricing on outsourcing services when it's a deal renewal? I can take a first pass, and I'll request Rahul if you can chime in and add your perspective. In most cases, yes. If especially if the existing environment is not mature and there is a lot of, I would say, legacy estate, lack of process standardization, I think there is a lot of room for optimization and improvement over there, where we are seeing that level of posture and aggressive pricing being asked for by clients, because clients do realize that there is a lot that can be done, and there is enough to be enough for the provider to be able to do and still deliver 30%. So yes, largely in 70 to 80% of the deals, at least that I worked on, we did see fairly aggressive pricing or aggressive posturing when it came to deal renewals as well. But having said that, I think there are also a few clients where, as you can, if the environment is fairly mature, they've been outsourcing for the last 4 or 5 generations. You may not be able to ask for a 15%, 20% price reduction, right? Because you've been working, for example, there was a particular deal that I worked on. The client and the provider had been working together for the last 20 years or so. And for at the time of every renewal, they got a good bit of discounts. But obviously, it has started to flatline. And not to say that they're not getting any better pricing than before, but then the quantum of that has declined over the last few renewals, right? Obviously, because the provider has obviously done a lot in terms of automating the processes, in terms of improving the legacy estate of the environment and all of that, right? So that this they don't have the same level of juice now to be squeezed unless you fundamentally reinvent processes and you start reinvent, as I spoke about earlier, bring in more AI into the picture. But there are, I would say, fifth generation customers where you may not see the same level of aggressiveness, but at least in the first gen, second gen outsourcing deals renewals, we are seeing a fair bit of aggressive pricing posture. Rahul, I don't know if you have observed anything different or anything counterintuitive to this.
Yeah. So one thing which I'd like to add over here is I think enterprises are much aware and cognizant of the current market realities. So they know that providers which were growing at 10%, 15%, 20% in the past, now they are struggling to remain in the positive territory when it comes to their revenue growth. So they know that it is essentially a buyer's market out there right now. Uh, we have seen also, while I do agree with what you just said, Ricky, we've also seen situations where it was already a pretty competitive solution which they had from a particular service provider, and as the renewal was upcoming, they were still able to squeeze out some additional juice. One example which is very, very clear in my mind is the IT application maintenance deal. This was a 3-year deal signed back in 2023 between a large manufacturing firm and a tier one system integrator, and it was a very competitively uh, solutioned and priced deal, because there was a competitive RFE which had happened, and the winning provider actually had gone through that the entire process of first round, second round, BAFO, final contracted, levels. So very, very competitively solution and priced deal. But keeping in mind that the buyer was actually going through significant cost pressure right now. It was really struggling. The buyer had this clear ask that either we continue with the remaining 1 year with the originally contracted price, and post which we'll kind of open it up to the competition, or you straight away go in for a renewal, but we want to see additional cost savings and a more sophisticated solution to be implemented. Now, given the current situation, the provider found it more logical to go in for an early renewal and ultimately agree to the expectations which the buyer had. So net, this is a situation where even when it's pretty competitive already, uh, buyers know they have the upper hand, and they're still able to squeeze the provider a bit more.
Very valid points. Um, Again, let me bring because and Prashant, you've been tracking the industry for more than a decade now. Um, this kind of intense competitive activity where we're seeing such a bit of a sort of a pricing war happening in the industry, I'm sure this has happened before, right? And then the last such instance where I see was just at the start of the COVID wave when there was a lot of uncertainty in the market. W- Can you share some precedences from there? How do you see will the industry play out from here, given where we are now? How will this? How did that play out for the industry? How will this? How do you think will this play out for the industry over the next few months or few quarters?
No, absolutely. And we have been talking about it, right, Ricky? It is more around, of course. they say that history doesn't repeat itself, but it at least rhymes.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
it's always good to look at some of the things which happened historically, right? Of course, the dynamics are different. The parameters playing out are quite different. That was COVID. This is AI, and not that they're comparable, but but they end up commercially, they end up having kind of a similar impact. So at the time of COVID, good that you brought that. I mean, when you look at the margins, right? Again was a buyer's market, as Rahul mentioned. What's going on now? We saw a drop. We saw a clear drop in margins, right? And these were the times when again there was limited money. There were too many people chasing it, and there was definite pressure on pricing, and there was definite pressure on the margins of service providers. So yes, in terms of how things start playing out, how they start reflecting in the margins, right? It becomes a function of course, how what's more, is it a demand or a supply? We are in a similar situation today, right? If you think about the COVID times, well, yes, there was a compression, but then things started going back and people went into the transformation phase. And then if you extend this chart, you'll see some improvement
Mm.
coming for margins after this. Uh, and there's a lot of, that was a time when you and I, we were discussing all that wave coming back, right? A lot of transformation which was stuck on the edge, they were coming through, and providers again started regaining some margins there. But if you think about it now, right, these are the times when we have uh, different kind of dynamics, right? The COVID was more of a COVID was more of a one-time thing, hopefully, right? And 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 it played out. But right now, where we stand today is the dynamics of AI, right? As Rahul mentioned, it is deeply ingrained. It is ingrained not just technologically, but it has become a mindset, right? And it has become a mindset of enterprises, and service providers are kind of, they're having to play along that way at some level. Of course, in the longer run, we see that to be a win-win for everyone, right? But if you think about the coming few quarters, coming few years, the anticipation, and this is where we call it to be like we are in a phenomenal aspiration reality gap, right? So aspirations are very high, the reality is still quite basic in many places. And so the way it starts exhibiting itself in deals, right? As Rahul and you have been giving some beautiful examples, right? uh, it gets crazy, right? I mean, at times, is it about productivity? Is it really about, you know, true AI led motion, or are we using AI to kind of drive our other agenda, right? Or at the same time, if you're very constructive as an enterprise, do you want to fund your AI initiatives by squeezing in your typical large managed services deals? So all in all, we believe that it's gonna have, at least in the coming times, similar impact as we saw in the COVID times. And unfortunately, I personally don't see that recovery happening very quickly
Quickly.
as it happened in the COVID times. This is going to be a bit more sticky till service providers start figuring out how they're going to wrap their arms around these deals, how they're going to start regaining some of that productivity for themselves, right? Not sharing it in some cases, and actually sustaining their margins. But as I said earlier, also it's a matter of a bit of a sticky
Mm.
pressure on margins this
Okay.
time.
So I think the point is that there will be some short-term pain, at least for the
Yes.
next few quarters, till the industry, till everyone finds a way to make this work for them. And yeah, because I think I strongly believe in the long-term future where this industry has a very, very big role to play in terms of helping enterprises reinvent themselves and helping enterprises reinvent the way they're currently thinking about processes. But I agree with your point. I think there will be some short-term pain till we get over this current wave. Uh, I think before we also talk about one more point, I think which has been in the news for the last few couple of weeks. But before we get there, I think I'm asked by my marketing team to also remind you of a upcoming event that we are doing in Bangalore. This is going to be our first Engage event in India. We recently concluded our Engage Dallas event, and it was hugely successful. We had about 250 odd participants from multiple Fortune 500 organizations, talking about all things related to GBS, outsourcing, sourcing, vendor management, and so on. So we are having our first one of those in Bangalore on November 13th. And if you need more details, there's a link in the chat that you can click on and to learn more about this event. There's probably let's take this question because this one's very interesting, and I see this question from Wolfgang, who asks in terms of what new pricing components are outsourcers using to price AI-enabled business process solutions compared to traditional labor arbitrage outsourcing. So, Rahul, maybe if I were to throw this ball to you, do you have a
Yeah.
point of view on this?
Right. So I can share some perspective, and uh, it's, I'll say, a little bit of an early stage to really give a concrete answer, but we are seeing a few different types of models being proposed in various deals. The first one is essentially very similar to what we have seen in the past, wherever we have talked about transformation, which is part of a managed services deal, for example, business process solutions oriented deal, which basically is all about, while there is the traditional labor rate card, for the FTs, which will be deployed at steady state. There's also a pretty intense transformation initiative which will keep on going right from the beginning, for a reasonable amount of time, 6 months, 12 months. And there is a separate transformation fee associated with it. Now, on similar lines, we have seen the AI elements of a particular solution also being charged, in very clear line items, which are called out in the pricing schedule. Additionally, we have seen situations where those are not getting called out so transparently. They are essentially bundled in somewhere. So the providers rate cards, ultimately they do factor in the AI related costs, but they are not called out clearly. That's also very much there. With the advent of agentic AI, what we're also starting to see now is situations where there is a separate rate, for transactions which have been done, purely by the human FTs, separate rate for transactions which have been done, with the aid of AI. Um, Again, on top of that, there is, another kind of a model which is being now talked about, and we have seen it in a few deals, which is basically uh,
Oh, so I think
think
did we lose Rahul?
Rahul's video,
Uh,
yes.
yeah, maybe he had a connection issue. Maybe
Yeah.
we'll get him back. In the meanwhile, um, let's actually take one more question, which is there from the audience. It is related to the question is around from Michael, and he asks what vendors are having particular success with implementing AI to outsourcers. I think to answer that question, rather than having specific names, I think one thing which we've seen what the winners are doing as compared to the ones which are not having so much success is I think thinking about it, and we call it as the at Everest we have a framework to look at it. We call it as the PTSD framework. It stands for process, tech, skills, and data. The idea is that to me to be able to scale AI or to be able to have AI at scale, you need to be looking at every initiative from the lens of process, tech, skills, and data. So, which meaning you cannot have AI on a process which is not well refined. You cannot have you cannot run AI if you do not have the right tech in place, if the systems are not talking to each other. There's often a saying that, and then the third point is data, right? So D stands for data. There's often a saying that AI eats data for food, and right now in most organizations, we've effectively organizations are going to be feeding it junk food because there is lack of data synchronous and harmonious in organizations, right? So we need to solve for that first. And finally, I think a lot of AI initiatives fail not because the tech is not in place, but because there's not enough ability to adopt to change, right? That's the people part, right? So, or the skills part. So in our opinion, if any organization or any service providers which are having more success with AI are ones who are kind of solving for these four things before talking about the specific AI related initiative. um, and
And I'll
going to
just
go back to go ahead,
just
go ahead,
add
Prashant.
to it, right, Ricky, in terms of also one way is how you are engaging with the client, which part of the client organization and how well are you orchestrated, how well are you ingrained with the stakeholder at the client side, and what are you solving for? Because a lot of the AI wave recently, as we have been discussing also, Rahul, Ricky, is that a lot of FOMO, right? It's a fear of missing out has been driving these AI initiatives.
It
So,
is, yeah.
in a how sustained way are you really approaching the client problem statements, and what part of the client organization are you dealing with? So that also starts playing out in some of these situations.
Yeah, it's a band has a big role to play, 100%. And sorry, I'm going back to Rahul. Rahul, before we lost you, you were trying to complete a point around implementing tech for business process services.
Oh, yes. I mean, the additional model that we have started seeing, in some proposals we now is essentially the digital FTE,
FP.
who works along with the human FTs. So while there is a rate for the human FTs, there's also a separate rate for the digital FTs. So that's being proposed in some deals as well.
Brilliant. All right. And I think, and this has been the news in the last 2 weeks, right? There has been a proclamation which has increased the cost of H-1B visa. So our CEO Jimit really calls it very nicely. We calls it as the era of perma crisis, where we're seeing a lot of change happening. There's a lot of uncertainty about what new regulation might come through. We've seen a new twist being added to this with the H-1B proclamation, $100,000 cost to new H-1B petitions. And I think we all know, while the overall leverage of H-1B petitions for some of the larger service providers in this industry has gone down significantly over the years, right? But there is a bit of there is a sizable usage of these petitions. So I want to invite both Rahul and Prashant to sort of share your views in terms of how do you think this will impact the industry going forward.
Okay, I can offer my perspective first. So, I mean, just to set the facts straight, first of all, this will not affect uh, those people who already have the visa, so it does not affect the
I
H-1B
see.
visa holders. This does not affect the renewals. The impact is only limited to new petitions for H-1B visa. So that's point number one, which becomes relevant when it comes to, let's say, providers, aiming to replace some of their existing staff in the US, with new H-1B visa holders, or let's say, getting additional H-1B visa holders that can be staffed on newer engagements. Now, the impact of it when it comes to how this can affect deals commercially, one can simplistically look at it from this way. the existing deals, which already have onshore teams, which already have H-1B visa holders, in such cases, if you look at it where it's a steady state going on, the only replacement which needs to be done is people, let's say, who are kind of leaving the organization, and they have to be kind of backfilled with H1 with new H-1B visa holders. The impact over here would be not that significant. In our estimate, it would be roughly around, let's say, somewhere to the tune of 1% of the annual spend, 1% of the current ACV. But in situations where it's essentially a case where, let's say, a new deal is getting signed, that's the other extreme where you need to start up that team which would be working on the engagement, and that team needs to have a lot of new people. And again, assuming simplistically it's H-1B visa holders, which are kind of coming into the USA fresh. Now there's going to be a pretty big impact, anywhere between 5 to 15%, of what the typical annual ACV of the deal would have been. So those are the two extremes, the real truth would be somewhere in the middle, depending on what is the exact makeup of the deal, what is the current onshore offshore leverage. Within that, at onshore, how many people are having H-1B visas, and how many are local citizens, of the US. So the answer could be somewhere in between, of the two ranges which I just said. What we believe is going to happen is, there's going to be a lot more discussion between enterprises and providers around, do they need to rebalance the delivery models, keeping in mind this kind of regulation which has now come in? So do they need to change the mix of uh, onshore, nearshore, offshore? Do they need to work towards bringing in more local resources in the US? Those kind of discussions are bound to happen now going forward.
Yeah, though
Brilliant.
that is from the provider perspective, right? I mean, uh, so first of all, as you're aware, right? Even in the previous administration of this government, uh, there was a time when there was a hint of, we'll better start going localized in terms of our talent. So I think over past few years, a lot of these global service providers, they have been building their local capabilities in the US. They've been hiring locally, setting up centers, doing a lot of that stuff. So if you think about the visa application themselves, they have kind of cut down by more than half. If you think about last 3 or 4 years. So, at some level, yes, there will be an impact, right? Of course, it's a as Rahul also mentioned, the deals will start seeing the new deals at least where you need new fresh talent. That is where service providers will start taking impact. Will it be as bad as it would have been a few years back? It will be much better than that. We can take solace in that, right? At the same time, the way we are looking at it is that, um, given that service providers have developed critical mass of talent, and they will keep on doing that. They have a machinery of hiring pretty much established now. So we don't expect a huge compression in terms of margins,
Yeah.
but it's gonna be a near-term pain, right?
Mean,
So it will not be like a 1 percentage point. We believe that is much lower than that when it comes to the
yeah.
margins, overall margin effect on the service providers. But yeah, it's definitely gonna be something.
And I think beyond sort of the actual impact on margins, I think it's going to be that mindset of
Correct.
uncertainty which is it is creating.
Yes.
And personally, I feel it's only going to fuel a bit more offshoring and outsourcing if you cannot sort of bring them in. And that's why even I strongly think that the GCC wave is only going to get stronger because of this
Yeah.
reason. And second is, I think also a benefit for nearshore locations which are in the same time zone, be it Mexico or be it in Poland or some of those Eastern European locations or LATAM locations. They're going to benefit out of these kind of regulations more than I feel the locals. But yeah, that's our take on the H1B um, mandate. Um, I think we can probably take one more question from Shrikant. Have you observed any notable differences in AI across in the integration of AI across industry sectors or business processes? I can take a pass at in terms of the integration across AI across industry sectors. Um, we did this analysis, I think a few months ago, a few quarters ago, in terms of where, how does the adoption of AI and what sort of organizations have been able to, for lack of a better word, scale AI better than the others. I think generally speaking, we saw that financial services did come out to be better than some of the others, generally because their spend on tech, the spend on the process maturity is much higher. Generally, did see that inclination. However, I think because it's still early days and we do not have very strong data points to validate or invalidate it. I think at least at this point in time, it does seem that financial services seems to be leading the way, followed by some others, manufacturing probably somewhere in the middle, but obviously public sector is probably amongst the laggards in terms of adopting more AI. But we will probably this will change. I think given how dynamic the industry is and given how almost every industry is going through a significant cost containment pressure, this will change dynamically. I don't know, Prashant, if you have a different take to this.
No, absolutely, and I think that's correct, right? But and Ricky, to your earlier point, it is also a function of the PTSD, right?
Yeah,
So in their maturity curve, where do people stand in terms of their process, technology, data skills, debts? So financial services, we know for a fact, have been early adopters of a lot of technology. They have consolidated their platforms. They have better data structure, so to say, because they naturally they had to do that. They have been early adopters in terms of geos also. Again, North America is more mature in terms of its adoption curve. So yes, that's a natural way of looking at it. Whoever is more prepared from that PTSD lens uh, would be early adopter and would have better integration of
yeah.
AI in the systems. So yeah, we are seeing that, and we'll see how that plays out.
Even in terms of geography, regions, in terms of adoption, I think there's no two ways about it. We are definitely seeing North America to be sort of leading the way along because
Right.
generally because of the ability to spend more on technology and the scale at which North America organizations are operating at. I think it's almost an imperative that they have to adopt AI to be able to sustain in that competitive market. Obviously, then followed closely by, I would say, where do you think APAC versus Europe would lie? I would probably put APAC as second place compared to
Yeah,
Europe.
that's another interesting element, right? I mean, that's a complementary to what you just said about North America because regions like APAC, they are adopting technology now. So
Yeah,
I call these things like greenfield opportunities that born in cloud, right? So they are setting up their systems. So now they have the freedom to do that, not in a legacy way. So their
yeah.
debts are lower, right? So now they are doing it right, jumping into the next. So the initial money is going into the right preparation for AI. So yes, I would say that APAC is definitely picking up, and that's why we are seeing a lot of greenfield
Growth.
opportunities
Yeah.
coming out of APAC as well.
Yeah, if I remember the industry growth curves that we typically track in terms of, I think ROW and APAC are amongst the fastest growing
Correct. That's
markets
correct. Yes.
overall. Yeah,
Yes. They are. They are. Yeah. And that's our expectation also as we forecast some of these geographies. I think we see not just in terms of growth, in fact, in terms of absolute dollar added, right?
okay.
We believe that the smaller geographies, as they were considered smaller, right, they are going to be a bigger contributor of net new revenue coming from the whole globe. So yeah, there's a big significant chunk there.
Awesome. I think we cannot take any more questions, but we'll try and respond to some of these questions offline as well. But thank you so much for joining in and tuning in today. Thank you, Sim, for keeping this session so interactive and sharing your thoughts. If there's anything further we can help with, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you so much again. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye bye.